Ladies and gentlemen, you see, transformation doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't shout when it arrives. It builds in silence, it trains in shadows, and one day it rises with such force, the world has no choice but to turn its head. That's the story of India's Navy. That's the rise of a nation from coastal defense to commanding the vast, deep blue waters of the open ocean. Let me tell you something about grit. It starts with vision. Decades ago, India looked out over the Indian Ocean, not just as a space between shores, but as a strategic arena, a place not just to guard, but to project, to influence, to lead, and they knew, if you want to be a force on land, you need presence at sea. If you want respect in diplomacy, you need capability in warfare. And if you want peace in your neighborhood, you better have the strength to enforce it. India began laying down keels with purpose, not to chase headlines, but to chase control of their destiny, of their region, of their future. Submarines that vanish beneath the waves, silent and untraceable, destroyers armed to the teeth, built in their own shipyards, aircraft carriers, mighty and sovereign, with steel hulls forged in Indian soil, and skies above filled with pilots trained not just to fly, but to dominate. This is not coincidence. This is conviction. But steel alone does not make a navy great. Discipline does, training does, strategy does. Men and women who spend months at sea, sacrificing comfort for commitment, facing storms for security. India didn't just build ships, it built leaders, sailors, engineers, dreamers. It invested in ideas. It invested in the ocean as a frontier, not a boundary. Look around now. You'll see Indian naval flags in the South China Sea, in the Arabian Gulf, in the Straits of Malacca, in Africa's ports, in global drills with superpowers and island nations alike. You'll see them evacuating citizens from war zones. You'll see them delivering humanitarian aid where the world's hope runs thin. That's not just power. That's responsibility. That's the sign of a blue water navy, one that's not tethered to its shores but trusted across continents. And you know what the world has learned, that the Indian Ocean is no longer a forgotten corner, that the Indo-Pacific is no longer anyone else's playground, that the balance of power has a new anchor, and that anchor flies the tricolor. It wasn't easy. It took patience when the world wasn't watching. It took defiance when resources were scarce. It took vision when critics laughed, but they kept moving forward, ship by ship, drill by drill, wave by wave, until the horizon was no longer the limit. This is what happens when a nation sets its sights on the deep. When it understands that the ocean doesn't divide, it connects. When it realizes that to shape history, you must first command geography. And when it refuses to be defined by its past, and instead decides to define the future. So now, when a carrier group sails under the Indian flag, the world pays attention. When an Indian destroyer leads a convoy, partners feel safer. When a submarine prowls under foreign waters, adversaries think twice. That's not just a force. It's a message that India is not just a land power, not just a regional player, but a maritime giant. And let me leave you with this. Greatness doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it comes with precision, with preparation, with patience. India's Navy didn't stumble into the deep blue. It earned its place. It climbed from harbor patrols to high seas dominance. It rose not just to defend, but to define. To not just respond, but to shape. And in doing so, it became what few imagined, but many now recognize, a blue water giant. Visionary transformation from coastal defense to blue water dominance began with a fundamental shift in strategic thinking. For decades after independence, India's naval focus remained close to its shores, driven by the necessity to protect its vast coastline and immediate maritime interests. The Indian Navy operated primarily as a brown water force. centered on patrolling coastal regions and safeguarding maritime borders. The outlook was defensive, the posture reactive, and the ambitions limited by a mix of post-colonial constraints, budgetary limitations, and regional security concerns. Yet, embedded within this restrained doctrine was a deeper aspiration, a realization that the oceans held the key to India's future stature and security. Gradually, a vision took shape that looked beyond literal waters and toward the far reaches of the Indian Ocean, with an understanding that maritime influence was inseparable from geopolitical power. This transformation was not born out of sudden inspiration, but developed over decades through deliberate policy, long-term planning, and a series of strategic recalibrations. India's geopolitical location at the center of the Indian Ocean offered both opportunity and vulnerability. On one hand, it meant proximity to crucial sea lanes of communication, through which a significant portion of global trade and energy supplies flowed. On the other hand, it made India a target for interference by external powers, many of which had historically dominated the region. Recognizing this dual reality, Indian defense strategists began to articulate the importance of sea control and maritime domain awareness. The idea of blue water capability was not simply about having bigger ships or wider reach. It was about creating a navy capable of sustained operations far from home waters, projecting strength, deterring threats, and ensuring freedom of navigation in a contested and increasingly crowded ocean. Space. India began to invest in naval infrastructure, maritime intelligence, and indigenous shipbuilding capacity. Each investment was a step toward autonomy and global reach. Naval bases were modernized, strategic outposts like the Andaman and Nicobar Islands gained new relevance, and satellite-based surveillance systems were developed to enhance maritime situational awareness. Alongside this, naval doctrine evolved to emphasize not just defense, but strategic deterrence and expeditionary capability. War games and exercises became more ambitious, preparing for scenarios well beyond the subcontinent. The vision also extended to fostering maritime partnerships with like-minded nations, participating in joint exercises that strengthened interoperability and increased India's visibility on the global maritime stage. Integral to this transformation was the redefinition of India's maritime boundaries, not in legal terms, but in strategic imagination. The Indian Navy began to train and equip itself not for narrow engagements, but for theater-wide missions across the Indian Ocean region and beyond. Missions such as anti-piracy, patrols off the Horn of Africa, humanitarian assistance during natural disasters, and evacuation operations in conflict zones showcased not just capability, but intent. They signaled a navy that could operate with endurance, flexibility, and moral purpose. This ability to project power while also delivering stability became a hallmark of India's new maritime identity. Visionaries within the Indian Navy and national leadership played a critical role in this transition. Admirals and defense planners understood that a 21st century India would need to move beyond traditional land-centric thinking. They emphasized the integration of maritime strategy into national security planning. Maritime policy documents began to explicitly state the goal of establishing a blue water navy, capable of safeguarding India's interests wherever they might be threatened. This included the need to counterbalance growing Chinese activity in the Indian Ocean, from the string of ports encircling the region to the regular presence of Chinese submarines and warships. India's answer lay in presence, persistence, and projection, a consistent and credible naval posture across the region and beyond. The narrative was no longer about protecting the coastline, but about commanding the seas. India realized that great powers are maritime powers. This understanding drove the relentless pursuit of capabilities that could support sustained operations across thousands of nautical miles. Aircraft carriers, multi-role frigates, nuclear-powered submarines, and advanced maritime patrol aircraft were inducted not as symbols, but as tools of strategy. These assets gave India the ability to respond rapidly to crises, conduct offensive operations when required, and maintain a visible, credible presence in far, off waters. Each platform served a purpose, not just in combat readiness, but in shaping the environment to India's advantage. This transformation also redefined India's role in the Indo-Pacific, positioning it as a net security provider rather than a passive observer. Regional countries began to look to the Indian Navy for support, training, and cooperation. Naval diplomacy became a tool of influence, extending India's strategic footprint without firing a shot. As threats evolved from piracy to graze, own warfare, cyber attacks, and undersea competition, India's Navy evolved in tandem, embracing technology, doctrine, and strategic foresight. The shift from a coastal defense mindset to a blue water doctrine was thus not just a military evolution, but a national awakening to the importance of maritime power in shaping a secure, influential, and forward-looking India. Indigenous shipbuilding and technological self-reliance have been at the heart of India's journey toward becoming a formidable maritime power. The shift from importing foreign warships to designing and constructing complex naval platforms within the country marks a significant milestone in India's defense evolution. This transformation began with modest goals, but was driven by a strategic need to reduce dependence on external suppliers and build a defense industrial base capable of meeting the country's unique operational requirements. India recognized early that true maritime sovereignty could not be achieved through rented strength. A navy that aspires to operate across oceans must first command the means to construct, upgrade, and maintain its own fleet. This understanding gave rise to a focused push for indigenous shipbuilding programs that would combine national pride with strategic utility. The foundation for this push was laid by leveraging India's existing public sector shipyards and defense research establishments. Key among them were Mazagon Dock Shipbuilders Limited in Mumbai, Garden Reach Shipbuilders and Engineers in Kolkata, and Cochin Shipyard in Kerala. These shipyards evolved from basic repair and maintenance facilities to production hubs for advanced destroyers, frigates, corvettes, and submarines. The transition was gradual but deliberate. Each ship constructed locally brought with it lessons in engineering, logistics, and project management. More importantly, it created a domestic knowledge base and workforce skilled in handling the complexities of naval architecture, propulsion systems, weapons integration, and electronic warfare suites. Indigenous construction not only saved costs, but also ensured better control over timelines, customizations, and future upgrades. One of the early successes of this policy was the Godavari-class frigates, India's first major attempt at building a warship that could match international standards. It demonstrated the potential of Indian industry to take on high-value, technologically demanding projects. From there, India moved on to building the Delhi-class destroyers, followed by the Shivali-class stealth frigates, and later the Kolkata-class guided missile destroyers. Each new class represented a leap forward in design, firepower, stealth features, and automation. These vessels were not mere copies of foreign blueprints, but incorporated homegrown innovation and customized solutions suited for India's operational theater. Alongside surface ships, India also pursued indigenous submarine development under the Advanced Technology Vessel ATV project, which led to the creation of INS Arihant, the country's first indigenously built nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine. This achievement placed India among a very small group of nations capable of constructing such platforms, underlining the technological maturity and ambition of its shipbuilding program. The centerpiece of India's shipbuilding capabilities was the launch of its first indigenous aircraft carrier, INS Vikrant, built by Cochin Shipyard. This vessel symbolized more than just naval power. It represented decades of policy continuity, scientific effort, and national commitment to maritime self-reliance. Constructing an aircraft carrier from the keel up is an engineering challenge that few nations attempt. It involves complex integration of aviation systems, propulsion radar arrays, and advanced damage control mechanisms. INS Vikrant not only demonstrated that India could overcome these challenges, but also signaled a shift in global perceptions about India's defense capabilities. It proved that India was not just a buyer of technology but a builder of power. Parallel to shipbuilding, India also invested in developing indigenous weapons and sensor systems through the Defense Research and Development Organization (DRDO) and collaborations with private industry. These included sonar systems, electronic warfare suites, torpedoes, and the supersonic cruise missile BrahMos, which was co-developed with Russia but increasingly manufactured with Indian components. This ecosystem of innovation further reduced the dependency on imports and ensured interoperability across platforms. It allowed for faster maintenance cycles, easier upgrades, and better adaptation to changing threats. Moreover, domestic production stimulated employment, industrial growth, and technological spillover into civilian sectors, making defense indigenization a driver of national development. A vital aspect of this self-reliance was the integration of the private sector into naval projects. Companies like Larsen and Toubro and Bharat Forge emerged as key players, supplying critical systems and even participating in the construction of submarines and next-generation vessels. This public-private collaboration enhanced competitiveness, drove innovation, and created a supply chain that could support sustained naval expansion. Over time, India began to export naval platforms and services to friendly nations, offering patrol vessels, offshore support ships, and maintenance expertise. This export capability not only strengthened India's strategic ties, but also validated the quality and reliability of its indigenous platforms on the global stage. Technological self-reliance extended beyond hardware to include software, data systems, and strategic autonomy in surveillance, communication, and cyber resilience. The Indian Navy began integrating artificial intelligence, network-centric warfare capabilities, and unmanned systems into its planning. The ability to develop and control these technologies domestically gave India a critical edge in future warfare scenarios, where information dominance is as crucial as firepower. The journey towards self-reliance was not without obstacles. Delays, cost overruns, and technological gaps occasionally challenged progress, but the broader trajectory remained forward, focused and resilient. Strategic presence across critical global maritime choke points has been a cornerstone of India's evolving naval doctrine, reflecting both its ambitions and responsibilities as a rising maritime power. As the geopolitical landscape shifted and new threats emerged in the Indo-Pacific, India understood that securing its national interests required more than just guarding territorial waters. It required sustained visibility, operational readiness, and logistical capability at key maritime junctions that influence global trade, energy routes, and security dynamics. These choke points, Narrow, strategic passages like the Strait of Hormuz, the Bab el-Mandeb, the Strait of Malacca, and the Sunda and Lombok Strait represent more than lines on a map. They are arteries of global commerce and energy supply, and whoever maintains a credible naval presence there holds significant leverage in both peacetime diplomacy and wartime contingency. India's geographical position places it at the heart of the Indian Ocean region, adjacent to these critical sea lanes, with over 90% of its trade carried by sea and vital energy supplies coming through the Persian Gulf and Southeast Asian routes. India's economic security is directly tied to the freedom and safety of these choke points. Recognizing this, Indian naval strategy began to focus on expanding reach, presence, and surveillance across these regions. Warships, submarines, and maritime patrol aircraft became regular fixtures along these routes, not only for deterrence but to ensure swift response to emerging threats. The Indian Navy institutionalized this approach through regular deployments under the concept of mission-based deployments. Warships were strategically positioned in various parts of the Indian Ocean to provide constant coverage, allowing for rapid reaction to piracy, smuggling, or regional instability. The expansion of operational footprints also required logistical infrastructure. India began negotiating access to foreign ports and established naval agreements with key regional partners. Access to the Duqm port in Oman, the Changi naval base in Singapore, the Sabang port in Indonesia, and agreements with countries like Seychelles, Mauritius, and France for use of their overseas bases allowed Indian naval assets to sustain longer missions and operate far from home shores. These forward logistics agreements acted as force multipliers, extending India's reach without the burden of overseas military bases. They provided a footprint of influence across the Indian Ocean, allowing India to monitor choke points, secure vital sea lanes, and assist partners in need. Strategic presence was not limited to hard power assets. India enhanced its maritime domain awareness by building radar networks across island territories and partner countries. The Information Fusion Center for the Indian Ocean Region IFCEOR, headquartered in Gurugram, became a hub for maritime data sharing among regional nations. By tracking shipping activity, monitoring suspicious vessels, and sharing intelligence with friendly navies, India positioned itself as a guardian of regional maritime stability. This soft power projection created trust and demonstrated India's commitment to being a responsible and capable security partner. The Andaman and Nicobar Command, India's only trice, Urva's theater command, gained renewed importance in this strategic vision. Situated near the Strait of Malacca, this island chain provides India with a forward operating position from which it can monitor one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. With improvements in airfields, naval docks, and radar stations, the command has evolved into a pivotal asset for surveillance and response. Its location enables India to keep a close watch on Chinese naval movements, especially as Beijing continues to expand its presence through its Belt and Road Initiative and naval deployments in the Indian Ocean. India's active participation in multilateral naval exercises further reinforces its presence at key choke points. Exercises like Malabar, conducted with the United States, Japan, and Australia, often take place in or near strategic maritime regions. These drills are more than symbolic. They are operational demonstrations of collective will and capability. They convey a message that India and its partners are committed to a free and open Indo-Pacific, where international law governs the seas. Such exercises enhance interoperability and ensure that Indian naval forces are familiar with operating alongside other blue water navies in high-stress environments in times of crisis. India's strategic presence at choke points has proven invaluable. Whether it was evacuating Indian citizens during conflicts in Yemen and Lebanon, or providing humanitarian assistance to countries hit by cyclones and tsunamis. Indian naval ships have arrived swiftly and decisively. These operations often took place near critical choke points, highlighting India's readiness and logistical ability to project power and compassion alike. It showed that presence is not just about warfighting. It is about being able to shape events, offer support, and secure peace when instability threatens. India's approach has also taken into account the growing naval presence of China, which has been expanding its influence through port acquisitions and regular submarine patrols. India's response has been measured but firm, emphasizing transparency, freedom of navigation, and regional collaboration. It has focused on creating a security architecture that includes regional stakeholders, from Africa's east coast to Southeast Asia, ensuring that the Indian Ocean remains a zone of cooperation rather than confrontation. This approach, rooted in visibility, readiness, and partnership, reflects a mature maritime strategy aligned with national interests and global stability. Power projection through aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines has redefined the capabilities and strategic posture of the Indian Navy, signaling its transition into a true blue water force with global reach and deterrence credibility. Aircraft carriers represent the most visible and versatile symbols of maritime power, functioning as floating airbases capable of sustained operations far from national shores. The induction of INS Vikramaditya and the development of the indigenous INS Vikrant marked a significant leap in India's ability to launch air power across the breadth of the Indian Ocean and even into adjacent theaters. These platforms allow the Indian Navy to project force without relying on foreign bases, extending its operational reach into regions that are vital for trade, energy security, and geopolitical influence. The capabilities of these carriers go beyond just launching fighter jets. They serve as command and control centers, coordinating joint force operations that include naval aviation, surface combatants, and submarines. Equipped with advanced radar systems, electronic warfare suites, and state-of-the-art communications, Indian aircraft carriers are engineered to perform multiple roles, from sea control and air dominance to humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. They are supported by escort groups consisting of destroyers, frigates, and supply vessels that form carrier battle groups, which operate as self-sustaining task forces capable of offensive and defensive missions in high-threat environments. India's carrier program is part of a broader doctrine that sees air superiority as essential for control over expansive oceanic spaces. In the vast Indian Ocean region, with its dispersed island territories, long sea lanes, and multiple flashpoints, land-based air support is often too distant or logistically constrained. Carriers fill this gap by bringing firepower to where it's needed, when it's needed, without the delays and permissions often involved in using foreign airfields. Their mobility and flexibility make them indispensable tools of diplomacy, deterrence, and disaster response. The presence of a carrier in a region sends a strategic message, reassures allies, and dissuades potential adversaries from attempting destabilizing actions. Equally transformative has been India's foray into nuclear submarine capability. The commissioning of INS Arihant, India's first indigenously built nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine SSBN, marked a significant moment in the evolution of India's naval deterrent. These submarines form the sea-based leg of the nuclear triad, ensuring second strike capability even in the event of a catastrophic first strike. With near-infinite endurance, they can remain submerged for extended periods, making them difficult to detect and capable of launching retaliatory strikes from secure positions in the ocean depth. This adds a crucial layer of deterrence, enhancing the credibility of India's nuclear posture and contributing to strategic stability in a volatile region. In addition to SSBNs, India has also pursued nuclear-powered attack submarines (SSNS), which offer speed, stealth, and versatility in tracking enemy vessels, protecting carrier groups, and conducting long-range reconnaissance. Leasing of nuclear submarines from Russia provided initial exposure and training, which India then leveraged into its indigenous development effort. Plans for building more SSN domestically are already in motion, reflecting the country's long-term commitment to a robust undersea force. These platforms offer the ability to deny access to adversaries, challenge sea control efforts by hostile powers, and secure critical underwater infrastructure such as submarine cables and oil pipelines. The integration of aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines into India's naval strategy represents a calculated investment in asymmetric capabilities. In a region increasingly crowded with maritime actors, including China's expanding naval footprint, these high-end platforms offer India a strategic edge. Unlike surface vessels that can be shadowed or intercepted, submarines offer stealth and survivability, while carriers offer visibility and psychological impact. Together, they provide a dual approach, one visible and overt, the other silent and concealed, allowing the Indian Navy to shape the maritime environment across both peace and crisis scenarios. These platforms also serve as catalysts for technological advancement and industrial growth. Building and maintaining such sophisticated vessels requires a highly skilled workforce, specialized materials, and integrated defense ecosystems. Indian shipyards, research labs, and private industry have been drawn into this effort, spurring innovation in propulsion systems, naval aviation, combat management systems, and survivability features. The ripple effects benefit not only the military sector, but also contribute to the civilian industrial base through skill development and technology transfer. For operationalizing such platforms involves intensive training, logistics, and doctrine development. The Indian Navy has invested in simulation centers, training academies, and joint exercises to ensure its crews can fully exploit the potential of these complex assets. Exercises with foreign navies, especially those with carrier and submarine operations experience, provide valuable insights and benchmarks for Indian personnel. The doctrines governing their deployment are evolving to integrate carrier-based and undersea operations into a coherent strategy of maritime dominance, coastal defense, and regional engagement across peacetime and conflict scenarios. These developments reflect a clear vision of what maritime power entails in the 21st century. It's not just about numbers of ships, but about the ability to influence events, secure interests, and deter threats across domains and across distances. The combination of air power at sea and stealth beneath the surface provides India with unmatched flexibility in shaping outcomes in the Indo-Pacific, enhancing its role as a net security provider and reinforcing its status as a credible naval force with global relevance. Thank you.